me, at 6:04 p.m. Today is May 7th, 2024. Can I have a motion to go into the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I appreciate you all being here. We're here tonight to review the financial statements for the period ending April 30th, 2024. That being said, I'll turn it over to John Spang and Mike Weaver to take us through it. Gentlemen?
So do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, I just to introduce it, what you'll see in this month's report are all I'll call them the deficit action steps that we talked about, and whether it was combination of moving money into grants or transfers and things like that. So we think that's done, and this is what it looks like now. So why don't you walk them through it, Mike?
Yeah, sure. Ken, I guess if you want, you can pull them up. I believe everyone has a copy. But the financial statements that we're reviewing are for the period ending 4/30/24. It was a rather uneventful month, which is good as we draw close to the end of the year. We had $11.9 million in expense for the month, and that is when you look back at our. Oh, there you go. Ken, if you could just go down to the summary page. There we go. So that, yep, perfect. So that 11.9 is in line with the previous 8 months average. It's about 12.4 is the previous 12 months average. So about a $500,000 swing. This month was a little bit higher in expense in comparison to last year. I'm sorry, in comparison to last month. And that was largely due to timing again. As we always speak, Rich, we talk about that transportation timing for those transportation bills and utility bills. And that was partially offset with some of the things John was alluding to, which was moving some of the salary and some of the benefits out of the general fund and into the grant fund. So from a year-to-date perspective, through the end of the month, we had 103.6 million with another 46.6 million encumbered, and that's against our budget of, I have here 150.6 million. Again, that 0.6 was from the additional appropriations. We'll see that down at the bottom in one of the next slides, but this brings us to a favorable $441,000 variance, which is slightly up. It's up about 121,000 from last year's year-to-date variance, which was showing a favorable 320. There are three items.
Let me just stop you there for a moment.
Sure.
Generally speaking, the one of the things that I particularly at this time like to watch very closely is the unencumbered balance that we have, which you're talking about at 441. That to me gives me some sort of an indication as to whether it be black or red as we approach fiscal year end. In this particular case, we didn't, as in the past 2 months or previously, we received that $600,000 one-time appropriation for the special ed and the other costs. What increase generally the expenses would fluctuate plus or minus to show that number would increase, decrease? Why would the number increase with no additional appropriation in the funding?
Yeah, Rich, that's a good question. The increase, like I said, that's partially offset by the month-to-date change in utilities and transportation, which is going the other way. but the favorable variance, what's driving that 121, is moving salaries and benefits from items that were in the general fund that John has spoken about a couple of times before into the grants fund.
Okay, so it's pretty much cleaning up your, um, your procedure that coincides with the reduction, your reduction action plan, correct?
Yes,
Okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
And there are below my first paragraph in the year to date, there are three paragraphs, very short blurbs, more for talking points, but you'll see the second one down at the close of the month, we receive, or at the close of every month, we receive, we have a meeting with the insurance broker, Gallagher, and they talk to us about the claims that were incurred in that month and how that kind of shapes up looking at their projections. This month was relatively high in previous months. So we just want to have that on our radar, but that is typical. So when I reviewed the last 3 years fiscally, the first a few months typically will house our I guess will house the months with the lowest cost, and the later half of the fiscal year is when most of the higher months come in. So they're still comfortable with their initial projections, and it's nothing that we haven't seen before, but it is something that we watch, and it is something you'll see in the financials month over month.
And again, staying on this point, I think it's easier for me to address things as we're talking about them, rather than wait and go through the schedule. I still like, for my own purpose, I like the monthly recap, and I understand the flaws in it relative to it being a cash basis. But when I look at the health insurance line for the current month, it's a little bit, let's say generally speaking, it's in line with the rest of the period of time, the month. But if you skip to the year to date, when you go into the cumulative one, not the monthly section, but the year to date one, and you go to health benefits and you look at the encumbrance, there's a $7 million encumbrance. Is that part of the bump that you're talking about, or is this 2 or 3 months worth of encumbrance that you have in there?
That doesn't, that is not the encumbrance that I'm speaking of. The amount we're speaking of that went up is what the actual claims were. There's a little bit difference in timing between that and what's actually in the financials for the month. But the amount that you're referring to, the large encumbrance in what we call the 5200s or the general benefits, that's all benefits. So that's not just health, but all of the other taxes, long-term dental,
No. In the line itself, if you look at the year-to-date schedule, if you can go to that.
Ken, do you want to put that up, the longer page? Is that the one you're talking about, Rich?
No, the year-to-date one.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yep. Going?
It's after this.
Yep. Keep
Right.
going. A little bit more.
Right there?
Nope, next, keep going. Yeah, it's in here in your benefits section. We have the.
One more.
No,
Right there.
That's the, keep going, that's the grant one. It's
No,
beyond the
that's
grant.
general fund.
Yeah, that's it. That's the summary.
No, I want to see the line number for the year to date.
Oh, Can scroll up. I'm not sure if I saw it in this report. Oh, let me pull it up.
It's up a little more. It's ahead of that, Rich, Ken.
No, that's not it.
That's why I like these meetings in person.
I'll pull it up and share my screen now.
Yeah.
I even think it make it much easier if we start numbering the pages. Because when they print off, they just print off in a section.
Yeah.
And if then we won't be fumbling when we go through the package. For today, I meant that, we could look at that at the further down the
Yes,
road.
yep. You're in the right section.
Yep.
You just have to get to,
This yellow highlighted is the health insurance for April.
just go to the benefit portion. That's it. Mhm.
This is it.
Right. See what I'm saying there? You got health insurance, you got the life, and then you have the dental. The health insurance is where I'm looking at that $7 million encumbrance. Now, does that encumbrance take care of the most recent high claims you were talking about, or this is, if you look at this for 2 months, it's over $3 million a month in claims and charges. If you look at it for 3 months, it's a couple of million. So I'd like to know what's in the 7 million.
The $7 million amount that's encumbered, that is not including the most recent month. It would be in the actuals that we see that number, the 18,372. I have 802, so right to the left of that. So this is where the actuals are. This encumbrance amount was encumbered for the rest of the year. John, I believe that's what's put into the system at the beginning of the year based upon the projections from Gallagher.
Well, it's also, the employees share in the cost of the health insurance, cost of the premium. And let's say, for example, a teacher is paying 18% of the premium, then this represents the other 82% that comes out as those months go on. So it's the remaining employer share based on individuals.
Okay, I might be getting too detailed, but let me understand something. In the accounting, I would accrue what you had just mentioned, the high month. And that's what I would assume that accrual would be part of an encumbrance. And
Yep.
then the whatever the difference, the arithmetic forces out the differences between the budgets. So if you're telling me that we have hypothetically a high month, which is extraordinary, let's say it's $4 million in claims, and because of the processing system, it hasn't been processed, it hasn't gone through your cash flow yet, I would have thought that you'd pick it up as an accrual and it would be part of an encumbrance, and and therefore that would adjust itself to your differences between your budgets. Otherwise,
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Rich. We use the cash basis of accounting, so we don't have monthly accruals. So no, that wouldn't be reflected in the 7.4.
Okay, it's just something that we'll have to discuss next year, because it does make something, misleading. Let's take an extreme case. Let's say you had an outrageous month that was $10 million that you're talking about. Okay, and you didn't get to book it, and you didn't pay it yet, and your budget only shows a $7 million encumbrance. Once you put that into the actual, whenever you go to pay it, then you're going to show the negative or the deficit.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, I don't know how complicated it would be to start amending some of the stuff on certain items to pick up accruals on it because it makes more sense. But that could be a discussion for later. That's why it misled me when you were talking about the high cost. I was looking to see the high cost somewhere. And so when I saw the encumbrance, that's what I was thinking, that the encumbrance was some potential claims that you hadn't booked yet, physically that you hadn't booked yet. So in our terminology, that you made the accrual for it. But that's apparently not the way you're doing it, correct? It's not the way it's done.
That is not the way, correct.
Okay. Okay, but you do see my point, right?
Sure.
All right, go back to your thing. Thank you. I think it leaves us open for big surprises.
Mike, do you want to go back and just show the bottom line, whether it's on the summary page or not? Or Ken could, because I think that's the takeaway really, where we are. I think it, demonstrates I'll call it the black figure. Right. Yeah, if you just showed them, the two component parts get taken together. If you could just, you want to explain that?
The year-to-date expenditures, and then we add the encumbrance in, comparing that against our annual budget, you get the budgeted balance. Here is slightly negative, and that is because the additional appropriation is down below the 602. And when those are added together, that's where you get your 441.
Right, so we have an unencumbered balance of about 441,000 at the end of April.
Right.
After all the deficit things were put in place. Now, we do know there are things that are not encumbered until later, some of the spring things, but we believe it's less than the 440. So barring anything really unexpected, we should be fine.
When you say fine, John, I'm
Well, in the black,
that
in the black,
to mean that
yeah.
come June 30th, we'll be in the black or zero, one or the other, but not red.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
But
okay.
there's still a month to go of the school year.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
Rich, two other things that we talked about. One was that we're experiencing is because of the open positions and some of the absenteeism, that Kelly Services is being utilized.
Or you can go back into your narrative. I'm sorry to take you, but let me just stay on that point. I'd like to Gladys and to Teresa, in order to understand these numbers in the financial statements, there's, at least from my point of view, maybe just because I lived with this all my life, I like to understand the mechanics of how the numbers are arrived at, so I have a feel for what I'm looking at. So my conversation with John and with Michael is more of a technical conversation, but I find that the way it's done could potentially create a surprise for us until these particular numbers are booked, if the figures we're talking about are not, I'm using the word approved. So that's something John and Mike, we can talk about later to see how your system does this, or what we can do to correct this, to have a better, a better feel for presentation of the numbers. Or if it can't be done, then some sort of a schedule that says, this is stuff that is in a pipeline, so to say, and to be expected to, to hit our books. Okay,
Yeah, we could discuss that. I think there is probably some room around possibly changing some of the encumbrances and the POs if need be, if it was over a certain threshold, like you mentioned before.
okay. Or as I said, if the numbers are large enough and there can't be that many, you can have a supplemental schedule that says to this, we're looking, to have costs come in next month or whenever you book it of X number of dollars, so we can get a better picture of that unencumbered balance, more timely.
And the last item that we not discussed, but kind of put on a watch list is as the year moves on, there are increased placements into special education, and some of them can be costly. So it's just something we keep our eye on in addition to all the regular items.
Go back to the narrative where you were talking about I guess it was the Kelly Services.
Yes, that's this area. Yeah, so Kelly Services in the beginning of the year, or I should say, I guess, John, at the end of last year, the number that was put out that we encumbered was $2 million. That $2 million, the expense itself right now, it lives in the grant. It doesn't live in the general fund. But because of slightly higher absenteeism and some open positions, we are seeing the weekly invoices climb higher, higher and higher. And now, based upon the calculation that John did, which takes the remaining days that are left in the school year and kind of looks at what we spent so far and gets an average per day, it looks like the actual number that's going to hit that those grants are actually going to be closer to 2.8 million. So that about an $800,000 difference.
And again, for clarity purposes, that particular line number cost is not, I repeat, is not in our operational budgets. Anything we're looking at that's on the screen, it's in one of your grants. I'm not sure which one it is, but it has nothing to do with
Probably
the operational budget for this particular year. Is that correct?
Correct.
It is. The reason we were concerned and the reason we're bringing it up, though, is it's in the ESSER 3 grant.
Yeah.
There was 2 million in the ESSER 3 grant for it, and now that's been completely depleted. So if you remember when we adopted the budget, we had different budget drivers, things we were going to bring over into the school budget, including the ESSER 3. And one of the components on that driver page was $2 million to pay for Kelly Services. So now, as we bring it over, there's more that has to come over if it remains the same next year or goes up than it is this year.
So where is in the grant itself? Excuse me, in the grant itself, are you saying is there enough funding to absorb the increased cost? I mean, you can't go negative in a grant. Is that correct?
This year, you're right. There was $2 million in the ESSER 3 grant, and now the residual or the overage, we're now using the Alliance grant to
I see.
pay the rest of that.
All right. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Oh, the government's paying for it.
Yeah.
Rich, I think Teresa has her hand up.
So what you're talking about is the purchase professional service line?
Yes.
Okay, that's, thank you. You're talking
Yeah.
Kelly Service, but that's not what's on there.
Yep.
Okay. And then the comment you made, the last point was on the watch was the special ed cost, of course, which we have no control over, but that cost, it seems to be going up in the last couple of months, correct?
Yes, we've had some new placements.
If there are new placements that we haven't budgeted for, then yeah, that would.
Okay. Okay. All right, fine. All right, so my feeling is at this stage of the game, when we're looking at 10 months into the operations, I said, I focus on the net of those two numbers to give me a feel to where we're going to be come the end of the year. Next year it's a different, we put the budget together, we'll have more insight and we'll know what's going into the line numbers. So I think the next year, I think the variances that we see will be more reasonable and it won't be as large as we're seeing now. But that's fine. Teresa, do you have any questions, or Mrs. Cooper?
I'm good. Thank you, Rich.
Okay. The next item on the agenda was the reserve. Was that correct, John?
John, you're on mute.
Yes, the request to draw down reserves and the ad hoc committee and the $3,044,000.
Now, there's some confusion on that. I don't know where we stand currently on that. The last actual activity we had was when you and Kevin went before the ad hoc many months ago, stated your case. I don't think there's been any meeting since then, and I was told by one of the council members that we should close out that request because in our conversations of last month and continued conversations currently, your reduction plan has worked, completely. So that specific request is sort of null and void. Not to say that we don't want to or may have to go back for some other situations if we went into the red this year or we had some other thoughts. Do you know what the procedures are on this? Number one, and number two, who would make a request to the council? Would that come from you or would it come to the board?
So Rich, any request for additional funds, whether it's a drawdown of reserves or a drawdown from surplus, would come from the Board of Education itself to the mayor's office en route to the city council. It's not something administration could really do on their own or should do on their own.
Is there something I could ask you to do? Would be perhaps to find out from Dan Garrett as to what kind of procedure is necessary to close this particular chapter before we, so we're blank. And if we want to open up a new, let's call it a new case, because this particular case is closed, and what we have to do, and then you could advise us, and Mrs. Cooper then can make a decision as to what we want to do.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, this way we can get the housekeeping done and keep current on that. I'm happy to hear that all of the reduction plans work. Let's say quite an experience. Hopefully we never have to go through it again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda was the issue of W-2s. At our last board meeting, it was brought in public session, I believe by Aaron Daly, that there were issues with the issuance of W-2s and creating some sort of a problem. I'm not sure whether it was with the state of Connecticut or with the IRS, where some people, and later on, as you and I discussed, you personally or got notices indicating that your return was being held up for whatever reason. Can you tell us a little bit, perhaps, what happened, and has this been resolved, and has the staff been advised of the corrections?
Mike, do you want to handle that and I'll fill in if,
Sure. So at the end of the year, the W-2s and W-3s that are filed by the employer are sent to the Social Security Administration through through a portal that they have.
and
And
Mike, could you explain just what the W-3 is in case you're
the
unfamiliar?
W-3 is simply just a summary of the W-2s.
Thanks.
And on that particular submission, it's a computer printout submission. It's not a form that we fill out. There was an error on one of the numbers, and the Social Security Administration had rejected the file. And because it rejected the file, certain returns that were picked by the IRS, we're told it was random, were withheld until further review. And employees were getting a CPO-5 notice from the Internal Revenue Service, just saying that it's under review. There's nothing to do. It typically takes between 45 and 60 days. And if it is more than 60 days, to please reach out. In the meantime, administration here was digging with the IRS and the Social Security Administration to find out that there was an error and then locate the error, correct it, and resubmit it. So that's exactly what we did. And I believe Dr. Casimiro sent out the communication to the staff, so they are made aware of everything that we know now. And as of Thursday, people started to receive them. I myself got mine today.
Okay, so the issue has been resolved, correct?
Correct.
The initial error, the W-2s are created from your payroll system. I mean, you know what created the particular problem, or what?
Yes.
Was there a box that was left? I mean,
So
how did something like this happen?
One person.
Although the W-2s and W-3s and much of the filings, there are other payroll filings that we have to file quarterly and annually, but much of those, although they're generated by the system, do require people to go in and actually update numbers, to check certain check boxes. And one of the things that changes is the maximum amount, the max salary that there's Social Security withheld against. That number changes, or subject to change at least every year. And it would require the system to go in and change that, and that number wasn't changed. So unfortunately for one person, that triggered the Social Security Administration to not accept the file. They will not accept the file if there are any errors, and there was only one, but they did reject it.
Okay, all right, and so at this particular point, Kara had sent out notices. People are receiving their refunds if they have more, or I guess that's their concern. So, all right, and was the matter handed, in a quick manner or fashion?
As quick as can be. Sometimes calling the IRS, especially around this time, and the Social Security Administration can have us waiting on hold for a while until we get through to the proper sources, and sometimes takes multiple calls to call back and make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. But yeah, we did it as fast as possible.
I think also we got some different information. We called right away. I think it was early March when we realized something was up, and we were told our file was complete, it had been accepted, and there was nothing wrong with it. And so we kind of rested and said, oh, it must be just things moving slow. But when it got, we heard more and more of these letters that people were getting, we called back, and that's when we got a different answer this time, that there was one person with one error, and as Mike described, so. We're-
Yeah.
I
And
don't
John,
know,
it
we
might
did
be
rest on
fair-
our laurels for a little bit, thinking everything was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and since the point that Kara sent out the letter, you haven't received any other issues or complaints on the subject matter?
The only thing I've heard is that 2 people told me that they've actually received their return.
Yeah, okay. Very good. So, very good. All right, well,
Wait a minute, wait a minute. Rich,
Teresa
Sure.
has her hand up.
yeah, I see.
I just want to confirm, Mike, when you said you received yours last Thursday, you received your refund? Is that it?
No, last Thursday, I was the first time I received word that someone received theirs. It was someone at the
Oh,
school. I
okay.
received notification today from Intuit, who I do my taxes through, that they'd received the return and they're going to take their processing fee out, and then it should be along to me shortly. So,
Thank you.
So I just wanted to bring this up to the board so that we understand what happened and it's part of the conversation that if things happen in the district, I just like to make sure that, we focus, if it's something that we can do, that we focus on the issue and, find out that it's been attended to and as quickly as possible. Are there any questions relative to anything we discussed tonight,
Well,
Teresa?
just want to make sure you were saying the average monthly expenses are between 11 and 12 million dollars, right? And is that already taken care of for the last 2 months in that encumbrance column?
Yes,
That's already,
We encumber our salaries, and as you saw, we encumber our benefits, so salaries are encumbered, meaning the money's set aside.
yeah, I just want to make sure the home stretch, we're gonna be good so far.
Yes, Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
that's the optimistic approach. So it's good. We don't have the full committee here, but I'm gonna ask the next time we meet is what could we do to improve the financial statements that would make it easier for you to understand and to get information you'd like, to think about something we can do in the next year that we can perhaps, make these statements a little bit more informative to us and things that we want to see. For
You're
example,
talking to the board members, right?
yes,
You're talking,
yeah.
oh,
Well,
okay.
I mean, to our committee members, number one, because we're the ones first one to see it, and we can recommend these changes to the board and ask for their opinion. What I would like to, is a thought, is we don't spend, relative to the total budget, the grants. It's in the past couple of years, the grant monies have been high because of the government funding, but generally it runs about 50 or 60 million dollars, and it's probably a third of our total budget. But I would like to see a little bit more information as to what these grants really mean. What is the subject matter of it? Possibly some indication as to the life of the grant. In other words, are there certain grants that have an expiration of the funding that you must use by a certain time? Things like that. So, we could go through and again have a better feel for what we're looking at. So that's at least my thought as to something we could improve going ahead on issues that historically in the past, in my experience, I don't know what's happened the last couple of years, we never really paid much attention, to those numbers. Granted, the largest one of the grants that are in there is the Alliance money, and then I guess the Title I money. But it'd be interesting knowing what the grants are used for, and as I said, is there an expiration date on the funding spending of it? So that's one of the things when we have our next committee meeting, hopefully will be fully attended. I'm going to throw out and ask people to come up with some comments on that. Okay.
I like that, Rich. I like that. Thank you.
Um, that being said, what I'll ask for is a vote that we, as a committee, would recommend the financial statements for the period ending April 30th to be recommended to the board for its acceptance. Yes, Mrs. Cooper.
Before we move on, John, I just would like to ask you a question, John, or either Mike. How do we contract Kelly Services, and how much does it come to? Is it for 6 months or a year, or by our services? Could you tell me that number if you have it? If not,
Yeah, I can. So I think it was, I want to say January of 22, when we really were having difficulty finding substitutes. They just weren't out there in the height of COVID, and everybody was competing for the few that were there. We turned to Kelly Services, thinking that they had a bullpen of subs, and whether their subs were one day in Newtown or one day in Ridgefield.
right, right.
So we switched. And the contract itself, I think was for 6 months. I'm not sure, but we have a 1-year contract with Kelly. I think it expires in June or thereabouts. And what the contract does is it specifies what we pay them for subs. There's a couple different categories. You pay for a teacher either for a full day or for a half day, and there are prices in the contract for that. And then if they provide like a paraeducator substitute, there's a price for that. And there may be one or two others. And then and that's the work. So what happens is each week we get a bill for the coverages that they provided the previous week, and we pay that. It runs generally 70 to 80,000 a week.
70 to 80,000 per week. Well, how
Yes,
many people are you talking about?
we think 125 vacancies a day. And it's not just what's happened is it's not just teacher absences. What we're using them for too, if teachers are out on staff development or writing curriculum or other things outside of the classroom, Kelly is providing a sub while they do that work. They're also filling some of the vacancies that we were never able to fill with subs every day. Hopefully it's the same sub most days, but they're doing.
I get that, and I don't want to cut a question. So, what would be the average amount for a full-time person and a half-time person?
I think Mike, you've just looked at that.
Amount.
Yes.
It depends on if it's a teacher or if it's a paraeducator. And then if it's a teacher, it depends, I think, on some certain certifications. There's not just one amount, Ms. Cooper.
Okay.
What do we pay him, Mike?
It's various
On average, right now, it's been about 75,000.
But what is it per teacher per day?
So for 6 months, or are you telling me for 6 months, it runs about 75,000?
We were initially estimating it was going to be about $2 million over the course of 10 months. And now just because of the utilization going higher, we think it's gonna be about 2.8 million for the 10 months.
Okay,
We've spent 2.2 million through April.
okay.
Mike,
That's
what is the
I
cost
like
per
that.
day? What's the price per day for a teacher? Is it 150 or?
It depends on certain things. I think it depends on the certification level that they have. It's broken down in a schedule in the contract. We can pull
Okay,
that if you want to look
okay.
at that.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
And Mrs. Cooper, this is one of the expenses that we had conversations with John and with
Tim Thompson.
relative to next year, since we're incorporating this particular expense into the budget, as John said, it's now part of the ESSER money, as to what we could do to try to minimize the amount of absenteeism, you know, per se. So it's something that, you know, we have on the agenda is to focus on amongst some other items that we'd like to look into next year to see how we can try to get a better handle on these costs. It's getting back to, then can I have a motion then to
Oh,
recommend?
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. Did we ever consider having our own floaters to do part-time work? I mean, to, you know,
Yeah, we have some of that. We call them building subs.
okay,
And we'll hire them. They'll come every day because we know we'll have at least one vacancy. And yes, we have some on our payroll. And they're providing some long-term subs too. We both are.
thank you.
And Teresa, I remember before I left the board that, you know, we were in competition with other districts and we were paying rates of like $75 a day for a sub. And, you know, we couldn't get anybody to probably work at Walmart and can make more money in a day. And then it went to $90, and John is saying currently it could be as much as 150. So it's a competitive market out there because of the shortages of people who are available or who want or don't want to get back into the district to teach. So, but it's I think post COVID, it highlighted the huge expense on this that we had. We also had some conversations with Kelly, not Kelly, with Kim about, you know, Kim's staff is very small, and you know, the thought process is how much would it cost, you know, whether it would be cost effective to hire somebody just to do something and remove Kelly, you know, Kelly from this because we're paying Kelly some sort of a premium on top of the actual cost. So it's again something that, you know, down the road we can look at and see what we can do to save, you know, to save some money. But
I agree, Rich, I agree.
yeah. Cooper, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No,
Okay, then could I have somebody want to make that motion to recommend to the board? That
So
we
moved.
thank you, that we accept the financials for April. Thank you. Gladys, you want to second that?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right. All right. Yeah, and tonight there's a council meeting. I thought they were going to talk about how much of that $12 million that we would get. I don't believe that's the case. I think all they're going to do is pass on the mayor's budget. So John, do you know anything more about what the procedure is for that $12 million and when we'll know what we're getting?
It's proposed to the General Assembly, and they have until Thursday night at midnight to pass it. Once it's passed and people expect it will be, then it needs to be signed by the governor. It's part of a $400 million leftover ESSER money,
Right.
or ARPA money that the state has. The lion's share of that is going to UConn at Stores. The next biggest part is going to Central Connecticut State College. And then I think it's 150 million is being distributed to cities and towns, including ourselves.
Do you know,
And
if
nonprofits.
yeah, John, do you know if that'll come with restrictions?
Only if the state ed department jumps in the next day or two to try and accomplish some things with it. I don't think so because it's so late. But you know, you never can tell. Certainly, some of our legislators would have a read on that. We could ask.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wait a minute, Rich. And
Yeah,
I think the article also said the total of 12 million wasn't going to go all to the schools.
that's
Right.
correct.
It's
Yeah.
not. Not.
So I don't know what they didn't say specifically what the schools would get.
Yeah, I'm in the dark, and I think that's why I asked John the legality of it. I tend to think they're not saying anything about this until, you know, they sign the document and cross the T's and dot the I's, and then we'll find out how much we get, if there are any restrictions, and how much the city is going to. Again, I don't know if the city keeps any portion of this 12 million. Whether they'll use it for city, you know, let's say city roads, or will they use it on school improvements, you know, such as fixing up and modernizing or whatever they have to do with the buildings. So you know, best case scenario, it could be 100% of it between the city and the Board of Ed. It all goes toward education, but you know, I don't know. It's everything is done late. You know, nobody. It's a crazy cycle where everybody has different timetables, and you're waiting for the state, and they're the very last one, you know, to tell you what you need, and everybody else is making budgets, guessing, you know, and hoping that they're
Yeah.
going to get that from the state. So seems like
Exactly.
a crazy way to do things.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Don't we have to close the meeting? I
Yeah,
move
I'll
to
make a motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Cooper.